Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Hi, my name is Trish, Dr. Trish, the Core Behavioral Therapist, and I am here with Asha Rampersad, who is a labor and employment lawyer, and she is also a professor. She teaches constitutional law at Wilfrid Laurier University, and she hails from Toronto, Canada. And she also happens to be my cousin. So this is going to be fun. And we're going to discuss as many things as we possibly can. And we also are drinking a glass of wine. So if you all want to grab a glass of wine and cheers to us and to you and to 2020. We're in December, everyone. And this is great. So cheers, everybody. I have white wine. I don't know what everyone else has, but what are you drinking?
It's red wine.
Red wine, okay.
It's the most relaxed interview I've ever done.
I know, right? I love that UB40 song, Red Red Wine. I always
so do I.
Song.
Yeah.
Good old school song.
Yeah.
So I invited Asha here because there's so much to discuss. She knows a lot about disabilities, especially in Canada and the law and whatnot. And I wanted to ask her some questions about what are some issues people are facing with collecting disability or people who are disabled during 2020 in Canada and in Toronto. What are some things you've seen?
Yeah, I mean it's a really broad question, but what I can tell you in relation to COVID in particular, I don't think it's going to come to as any surprise to you being a behavioral therapist that mental health issues are skyrocketing, and as resources continuously get diverted to dealing with the COVID pandemic, what we're seeing is a significant spike in people that are facing mental health disabilities such as depression, anxiety, and that's not surprising given the level of isolation that people are feeling. People can't see their families. There's a lot of change. There's a lot of job loss. There's a lot of financial instability, and during periods of change and financial hardship, you also see marital breakdown. You also see a lot of domestic violence on the rise. And I would say specifically, it's tough for parents to balance work-life balance for those that have the luxury to work from home with childcare obligations. It's tough for the frontline workers who also have to arrange for care while dealing with this crisis. And as a parent with a child with special needs, it's especially challenging because there's a lot of resources that are not currently available in person to service children that have a special need.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Yeah.
Asha is a parent. She's a mother. And shout out to Rafiq, her husband, and Isaac, her son. Asha, can you talk more about what it's like for you to be a parent with a child who's on the spectrum of autism, especially during this time? Yeah. Thanks.
It's difficult. And I mean, my child, Isaac, he's high functioning autistic. And so it's challenging because there are services that he relies on, such as behavioral therapy. He goes to a small private school, and those services are not available. The kind of yo-yo schedules with, a lot of teachers calling in sick, and the lack of consistency in that regard is tough for a child on the spectrum. So it's tough for parent and the child. That being said, there are some things to be thankful for. I mean, my husband and I are grateful and blessed to have the resources to care for a child like this. But there's so many parents that I've spoken to and there's so many parents, and if you read on the Ontario Autism Coalition site, that are really struggling now because they don't have the resources. Their child might have, they might be on lower, like on the lower spectrum of autism, or require significant more services, and it's very costly, and it's very draining. It could be an isolating journey. People don't understand that children on the spectrum think differently, that they may process information differently, they may misperceive things as a tantrum as bad behavior, a meltdown as bad behavior, when it could be
Especially
related.
culturally, I mean, I know in our
Yeah, I
culture,
mean, in our culture, we're from Trinidad.
right,
It's difficult, because the common thing is like, what's wrong with your child? Why don't you discipline
right.
your child?
You
They need a spank.
speaking,
They
yeah,
need a spanking, and so
right,
that's not the kind of thing. Sometimes you feel like you're between a rock and a hard place because you feel like you have to go through the motions and show publicly that you're disciplining your child when you're not. You know that some of their behaviors are not within their control.
right.
There could be meltdowns that are happening because there's a fire engine going down and it's too loud. There's sensory overload. There's too many people talking. And then, when things like that happen, my son might take something and throw it, not at a person, but just because, he can't, he might throw it, or
How he's coping.
scream or stim or something like that. I mean, great. We're thankful that there's been progress. I mean, it's incremental progress, and it is a journey. And so people say things like, and I guess they don't know, they might say things like, well, his autism is getting better. I'm like, no, well, he's going to have that for life. And my husband and I debated about whether we should not tell people about that. Maybe that's a decision Isaac himself might want to disclose and to other people. But I do feel that as it's incumbent upon us to educate our community and people in school, to promote inclusivity for people with
Right.
disabilities. And I think that a lot of people don't intend to judge. It's just that they're not aware. And there are times where I would get really upset when someone would make ignorant comments to me in the store, like, can you tell your child to be quiet? No other parent would tolerate things like that.
Wow.
And it's really stressful when you're trying to navigate a meltdown in a store that might be really bright, or loud, and you still have to deal with a parent's judgment. And so I like I told you previously, Tricia, I started handing out cards.
I love this.
So I brought one right here. It looks like
awesome.
it looks like this.
So Asha,
and
when strangers come up to her in the stores or what have you, when she's shopping with her son Isaac, she felt so frustrated, but she felt the need to make these beautiful cards. And I don't know how many parents out there do this to explain their child's disability. I mean, it's a personal choice, but can you talk about the cards that you made? The cards that you've made?
Yeah, I mean, I used to get angry, and I didn't think that was helpful.
They're valid feelings. Those are valid feelings.
Yeah, I mean, I used to get upset. Like, I mean, there's times where, with the stimming, it used to be whistling or, moving around, and then he learned a swear word, and then he would keep saying that swear word over and over again. And then I remember I was in the park one day, and there was a mom, and she said to her son, I don't know what that mother teaches her child at home, but don't play with that child. And so that made me really upset. And so I went up to the mom and I said, you may not be aware of this, but my child has autism. And I handed her the card. And what the card is that I just says, my son has autism. He's not being naughty. He has neurological disorder. If he could
Can you
communicate.
hold up the card again?
Yeah, it looks like this. And it says, if he could communicate better, he would say, please be patient with me as I learn to function in the community. I don't mean any harm. I may learn differently and not act the same as you, but I'm doing the very best I can. And then it's an explanation and said, my son has sensory issues and may scream or screech at loud noises or say inappropriate language if he's anxious, overwhelmed, tired, or hungry, or if there's changes in his routine. And I wrote at the bottom, thank you for respecting my family as we journey down the path of autism. And so, I mean, there's no right or wrong way. I mean, each parent is individual and on a different journey of what they want to disclose to to people, what they want to say. But I know in our specific circumstances that I mean, 8 out of 10 people, 9 out of 10, I'd say the vast majority would say, I'm really sorry, I didn't know. And so there is a tendency for parents that is particularly parents that have children on the spectrum to avoid going out in public because it's just so stressful dealing with the judgment in addition to the child. Like, it's let's not lose sight of the fact that this is a child in distress. They're not misbehaving. It may be bright, it may be loud,
and it's a neurological disorder.
yeah, and I mean, and so we really have to plan. We really have to plan before we go out to say, like, if he's having a meltdown, where are we going to go? Can we really exit out of this situation? Things like that. You know, his sleep, things, you know, really a plan. And so, you know, kids on the spectrum, not all of them, but have difficulty with transitions and change and moving from one thing to the next. And there might be rigidities in behavior. And so
yeah, so this is so interesting, and you really opened up with some great acknowledgments and things. You know, I work for a school too, as you know, and I actually work on a team that does IEPs, individual education plans for students. And I was wondering, you did say something about your child is not getting full services, especially during COVID. Is it a technology issue? I know you said that a lot of teachers called out sick, but are they not meeting online like other schools, or they're just supposed to meet in person with your child?
No, I mean, I think Isaac's not going to the regular mainstream public school. I think public school it was a challenge for him because it's the public school is catered to like a cookie cutter approach, right? And it's not really tailored for a child that has a special need. There are autism programs within the school, but it really depends. It's not tailored, it's not organized in between like a child that might be high functioning or a child that's nonverbal. So and they have no supports in terms of ABA therapy that's integrated into the autism program, which is a huge you can't
Can you explain what ABA therapy is?
Like applied behavioral therapy is a common service that kids on the spectrum receive. And so a lot of the schools don't offer that, or in certain public schools within Toronto, I've requested to have ABA pay privately for an ABA therapist to go into the classroom, and that's not allowed, which is problematic in my view because it's not really servicing the needs of the child effectively. And it would actually help the teacher out if it was integrated. So we've made the difficult decision. We've had to be creative in terms of our education. I don't want to harp on all the negatives about Isaac. There's so many like great things about him. He's a brilliant little boy. He's in grade 3, does grade 6 math, reading at a high level, plays the piano, self-taught, brilliant.
Oh, that's brilliant.
A brilliant little boy, very funny, very quirky, very, you know, when you cultivate a child and allow them to lead you, I need a school that can fit that. And it's very hard to find a school where you have a child that on the one hand is so bright, but on the other hand, it needs some supports with social development. And we did find a small little private school that has 12 children. They don't all have autism. They may have different issues, like different disabilities, but they're learning together, and it's beautiful to see them learning to interact with each other. There's a social skills class within the school. There's an emphasis on outdoor learning to help them with daily life skills. Our ABA therapist is allowed to come in. Right now, we were those services, in-person services, were not allowed.
Wow. And the school won't provide.
No.
Privately.
Yeah, and I mean, those services are very expensive. So you're looking at a parent that wants to do ABA,
right.
And if they can't send their child to regular school, you're looking at paying between $6,000 to $8,000 a month.
Wow.
And as good as our healthcare is in Canada and Ontario, there is no funding right now. Like we're in the process of transition, and it used to be a needs-based process, but that was revisited, and there was like a lump sum payment that parents got. But needless to say, I don't think the average Canadian or even the average American would
right.
be able to afford something like that. So you're going to have a lot of children in later stages of their life that may need to be reliant on a government. And so, I mean, I think our job as parents is we think long term. If you have a child with a special need, you always think in the back of your mind, like, when I'm not here, what's going to happen to my child? And so, I mean, I think with Isaac, he's coming along well. It's a different journey. He's learning at his pace. He's not bullied. He's in an environment where he's accepted for his quirks and all, and the school staff love him, and I think that means a lot. It's not like the stress that having to go through a public school and there's incident reports constantly, very rigidities in terms of the individual accommodation plans or the IDPs, and then fights over like what could be included in those plans. And it was just so bureaucratic. It stressed me out. And I said I needed something with a little bit more flexibility. I'm a parent that's hands-on, and I want to pop in and see my child at lunch. I want to pop in and be part of the education plan. And so we found that hybrid model works. And so my mom was fabulous with COVID. She used to help us a lot. But now, because she's at risk, she's older, we can't bring my son.
COVID,
yeah. And so, but I mean, as hard as it is, like we see him more. We see him thriving because we're able to provide services and give him individualized learning. There's a lot more people because of the pandemic, leaving aside children with a special need, that are thinking, let's reassess the way we teach our children. Like, let's think about homeschooling options. And so think about it. A child that's in a classroom with 25 other kids, one teacher, maybe one ECE, how much individualized attention is that child really getting at the end of the day? So I think you're going to see like a lot of people reconsidering the way that they teach their children after the pandemic. So, I mean, I think, the journey's been, there's bumps, there's been happy days. Like my son wrote me this card. It's really sweet. And he's like, I love you this Christmas Eve. This was last year in your room. I always put him on my bed, and I cuddled you and slept in your bed for 1 hour. And so he goes, now I come downstairs at 4:30 a.m. and slept. He gets up at 4:30 a.m. every morning. So
on the dot, huh?
Yes, on the dot. So yeah.
So interesting. You said that it can be stressful for you, right?
Yeah.
And we also spoke a bit about this, and for parents out there who are going through exactly what you're going through, maybe a little less or worse, or I don't want to say worse, more challenging. Where do you go to get help mentally, emotionally, for yourself? Where do you have any outlets you go to? What are some recommendations you have and outlets?
We're lucky to have a supportive family. And there are services in Ontario. They have autism services depending on the age, the catchment area that provides parent training and services for the children. The problem now is with the pandemic, you can't access a lot of the service. They're online. A lot of them are online. And honestly, between my husband and I, like, our jobs are demanding, and it's really hard, like, just to be able to do the basic things, like in terms of going to work, picking him up, thinking about bedtime, like all those kinds of things. We don't have the time to do all of those things right now. And so, we're just hoping 2021, there's a vaccine. Yay, there's some positive news.
And everyone will get it.
Yeah. And it helps me sometimes too, because, it sometimes it's hard when you see parents that have neurotypical children and they're like, oh, this kid's driving me crazy. I'm like, oh God, if you only just knew. If you only just knew. And you're looking and you're like, wow. And it's like, you don't want to compare, because we have some gifts too. We have a wonderful child. And so but it's a different kind of journey, and it's a different type of stress. And sometimes I think the beauty of the school Isaac goes to is there's parents that understand. So if we go on a play date and their child is having a meltdown, they totally get it. They're like, let's just go home. Why don't we break? They're at a good place now. And so they understand without even having to speak or to explain. There's that. We understand the journey together. Sometimes there's the Facebook chat groups with parents, and they have no other person to talk to. Parents that have children with special needs are way more likely to get divorced because of the strain that it puts on the marriage. And so some people, you see them writing posts in desperation, and they're like, I have no one to talk to. Today was a really low point. It was really hard. And they would say things like, autism won today or something. And so there's people that will post things and say, I'm with you, we're praying for you. And sometimes that's the lifeline that parent needs to hear, because they don't have that support anywhere else. So it's tough. And I think if there's one thing that you learn through all this is patience. I think we have like the patience of Job now. Like, I swear, I never had patience before. And oh my gosh, the kind of patience that you have to learn, because it is not effective to scream and yell
I just want to thank Asha for coming. I want to thank you so much, Asha, for being on this. I'm sure so many parents out there want to hear and learn more from a parent's perspective. So thank you so much for coming. If people wanted to get in touch with you, can they? Or no, not really, because I know you're a lawyer. And it's different. It's okay. They can get in touch with me and I can relate the message.
Yeah, like I have a LinkedIn page. They can always feel free to send me a message. Be happy to talk or direct people to services. Like, you live where are you? I don't even know where you live now, in Jersey or back in California. You're so international. I mean,
I know, right? I'm wherever I'm supposed to be. Right now I'm in Jersey. Right now. Okay. I was in Florida for a bit. Now I'm in Jersey.
I'm like in Toronto in Canada. So I don't want to be providing advice to someone that's in America. They're like, hey, what services do you have? I'm like, oh, no, I'm actually in Canada. So
but yeah. No, I think a lot of parents, even in America or around the world, do struggle with this. There's also beauty in a lot of children who's on the spectrum.
Oh yeah.
So yeah. Too. So.
Oh yeah, we wouldn't change him for the world. I think it's we've been blessed, and it's a different life, but it's a where it's beautiful too. And I just hope that you stay safe and everyone stays safe, and 2021 is around the corner. I think it's going to be a different experience up in New York there. I want to see what kind of ball is falling.
Oh my goodness. We'll be jacked up. But before we go, let's cheers before we go.
Yay. Okay.
Looking forward to 2021. Cheers,
Okay.
everyone.
Thank you for having me, Trisha.
Oh, thank you. I love you guys so much, and I miss you. And if you didn't have COVID, I'd probably already be visiting you in Toronto. But I'll see you. Bye, everyone.
Okay, see ya.